Yay!
Yay!
It won't be an hour. I don't know exactly how long it'll be, but we'll see. We're joined by game designer on Valorant, Riot, Dan Penguin Hardison. Dan, the patch change, it's large. The patch notes will be out at this point when we post this, I believe. So what I guess I would just want to start with, why did you feel like a change needed to be done in the beginning?
Yeah, sure. So in order to keep things fresh, we kind of are always looking into, updating the game. We have to balance the game kind of as we see it and as players are playing it, getting better, evolving the meta, all that kind of stuff. And basically, as we'd been looking at the duelists in the game, it was pretty clear there was a stark difference between like Jet and Raze and kind of everyone else. And we'd kind of mostly been thinking like, hey, outside of Raze, things are like mostly okay. We wanted to do like some minor adjustments to Raze and then kind of bump some of the underperforming duelists up. So yeah, we have buffs to ISO, Neon, and Reyna in this patch. The Reyna ones are a little bit more on the adjustment side, but that's pretty much the main reasoning is we wanted to make sure that duelists could make space for their team. And not everyone has to be able to, fly. That was like a big part of it internally. It's like, hey, let's make duelists able to fight. Not everyone can fly through the air. That's not going to be how we want to proceed with the game going forward.
I wanted the change to be Phoenix Sprout's wings made of fire and leaps into the back line.
That would be badass.
Yeah. Okay. So let's get into them then. Let's pull up the ISO changes. Let's start there. Begin at the beginning. Now, I don't know what I'm interested in, even before we start reading through some of these, though the viewers can. Is ISO's pick rate as abominable as it seems to be based on pro play?
So ISO in ranked is picked decently often and is, to be honest, quite bad. It's like he's fun. People like playing him, but he is underperforming across every bracket. So it's kind of like people enjoy playing ISO. But we didn't really feel like there was like a sharp reason for you to be like, hey, this is the obvious scenario where you want to be ISO, where you want to pick ISO. And that was kind of how I started when I was looking at these changes is like, hey, what is the like clear circumstance and what is the like draft reasoning for why you're going to pick ISO? And just from like a mechanics perspective, that was kind of why we started with the shield.
Okay. What about the changes then, Dan? Do you feel like carve out the niche for ISO over something like Jet, for example, because I don't believe Jet is being touched right in this patch. She's remaining, unscathed, I guess. She's still going to be seeing play. But why? What was the thought process then with the changes you've made to ISO and how you've tried to make him playable in some of these scenarios?
Yeah. So a lot of the things I felt about ISO when I was working on him, obviously when we're testing changes to the game, you play the agent some, you try to figure it out, like, hey, what are you feeling? And I was just feeling like a lack of consistency. It's like everything I'm doing is like I'm fighting dry, I'm swinging wide, and I'm praying that it works out. And it's like, oh, I think in our game people have some, desire for consistency, for reliability, for effective power. And so for ISO, just giving him the shield after he finished the channel is kind of intended to be like, hey, this is your like shot call moment where you're like, hey, I'm going to peek this specific spot with my advantage. And then we kind of, from there, had to figure out, like, hey, what is the right amount of, like, counterplay tell? And, how can opponents actually deal and react to this? I think in general, when we were developing the shield, we were really, really afraid of, like, adding a shield to the game in terms of, like, oh, it's pretty traumatizing when you shoot someone in our game and they don't die. So we kind of had to figure out the right levers and stuff like that to make it tolerable, which is kind of why it plays as sound in 3P now. When it finishes the channel. So it's kind of all about optimizing, like, I finish this channel, they're going to know I'm there, but if I have the right information, if I work with my teammates, then I get this, like, sharp moment of power, and I can actually fight my opponent, like, with a consistent advantage and kind of keep that snowball rolling.
Right. Seeing this update and knowing that it was focused around duelists, heading into it, I definitely thought that ISO would be the one seeing the most significant change, as he's the most significantly lacking compared to the other duelist competition. So far in the playtesting and all that, do you feel like this change has gotten him pretty close to the top tier pick duelists in Raze and Jet? Or is this a situation where you're going to be sort of consistently dropping little buffs until it gets closer to that point and not wanting to overtune things now?
Yeah, so I originally had this as a part of like a much wider list, but at least in our internal playtest, this was seeming generally pretty powerful. So I was kind of like, hey, let's ship this one big mechanical change first, and then we already have some other things in the back pocket that we tested that we can kind of add into the list into the fray if we need to. Um, yeah, but at least internally, this was like much larger than I would have expected. I think, in terms of like interpreting how powerful just getting a shield is, I think getting a shield at 150 is much better than oftentimes having a shield when you've already won your first engage and you're like a little bit lower health or could just be chunked out by a spray. So that was kind of what we saw in tests, was that it was stronger. But I'm not like, um, in general, I tend to lean on the side of like, hey, we should ship what we know is good. We shouldn't wait too long. We should just kind of do things when we're confident in them and then be ready to adapt and be ready to adjust when we can.
I have a question about just the way that this shield change affects the potential snowball that ISO players had, especially like I'm thinking TDM, I'm thinking lower elos, that sort of thing. You just get your first kill and then you continue to continue and continue. How does that change here? Because I feel like you're not getting that snowball as much if it's just refreshing the, I don't know. I'm not even sure what you're refreshing after you get the kills. It's just the duration of the shield?
Yeah, the timer that the shield lasts for.
Okay, but you're not
refreshes.
putting a new shield on every time.
Yeah, it's not like layering up like an onion.
Yeah.
At least I don't believe so, right?
No, I mean, but in the old ISO, you would get a kill and then you'd shoot the thing and then you get a new shield.
Mm.
Yeah,
are
you still get orbs when you kill people with this shield on. So
okay.
it's kind of like that mechanic is still preserved. It's not completely removed or anything like that.
Oh,
I didn't even
realize.
realize.
Yeah, I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so there is still a general increase in number of shields per round when ISO is popping off in this world for sure, because it's like, oh, when you're getting, your duelist kill resets, you're also getting shields. The buff is also, this isn't in the patch notes because it's not really changed, but the buff is also just long. Like, it's 20 seconds long, and the buff doesn't fall off when you shoot ISO's shield off. So it's basically like, you have a long window of time where if you're getting kills or kind of damaging assists, like Reyna style or Clove style, you're getting more orbs to shoot. And I think really that snowball is just about that early effective HP. And about being able to win that first fight, because I think that is like a huge part of Valorant as a game, and I think like statistically, at least what we've seen with healing is, and we'll kind of get into this later with Reyna, is like healing is just bonkers in ranked. Like if you have another chance to win like a 150 HP versus 150 HP duel, that is like, you become Exodia in ranked basically.
Wyatt, our TDMs are safe.
Yeah. Thank God.
Should we show the?
Maybe not.
Should we show a small piece of video? If you go on to the next one here, we'll just show people roughly, what things look like when you're channeling to equip the shield in the first place. I think it's going to be difficult to find the right timing to use this ability, to be honest. Obviously, like when you're attacking, if you want it as part of an exec or something, yeah, you could entry with it. But one of the things that strikes me is that so much of Valorant is like skirmishing beforehand in order to fight for that map control or whatever. And finding the right timing to actually don the shield, I think, is going to be... I imagine that I would suck at it. I know that I will die multiple times and think, should I use my shield?
I mean, it's the same with any ability, Josh. Like jet dash.
Well, but a lot of the duelists have stuff you do after after the big moment has happened.
Yeah.
So like the dismiss is like you do it after the moment.
You don't panic and get into a fight as a jet and activate your dash mid-fight.
yeah, definitely do that. Definitely do that. Yeah. Okay, let's move on to the next duelist then. I can't remember who it is though, so you'll have to bring it up to remind me.
Yeah.
Neon.
Neon.
Oh my lord, Neon. Actual lord.
I mean, we were losing it looking at this.
Yeah. So to start
Yeah.
off, the fast lane is just like, yeah. Well, actually, why did you change the fast lane? Did you just think it dropped a little too quickly?
Yeah, so this was like kind of like whenever we're looking at any agent to do updates, we kind of look at like, hey, how does the character fit into the game? Like how are things feeling from a strategic level? Are things feeling Are things feeling too chaotic? Are they too like confusing? And kind of wall smokes in my mind are like they're criminal. It's like they just come down and like everyone's looking at each other. It's the curtain call. Everybody dies. It feels kind of random at times. So when we were testing this change initially, it was like pretty simple change to put into the game, and it just kind of allows Neon's allies to kind of like actually position their crosshair in a way that like makes sense to them. It's like, oh, I'm gonna kind of track these angles as they open up, and then I can kind of understand what is happening. And that was just kind of the whole reasoning behind the change. Is just like, hey, this should make it a little bit easier to play around this character that is like honestly pretty difficult to play around for allies. It's like most of the time your Neon dies, you're looking at the minimap, you're like, how did she get there? She's so far away. How can I possibly help? So doing anything that could allow allies to feel a little bit more comfortable around Neon kind of sprinting in was something that I viewed as just kind of like, might as well do it alongside the other balance changes we were doing for Neon.
Yeah, okay, and the other balance changes are bonkers. So let's move on to those. Maybe you don't think they're bonkers, but they sound bonkers. It's not like I've seen them in action. But should we start with the first one, the sprint? So no longer has strafe speed reduced while sprinting. So that means that you can literally just wiggle around zippy zappy, right? You can AD, you can move, I don't know, diagonally and stuff. You don't have to be just facing forwards in order to get that max sprint speed?
Yeah, this is actually kind of like a confusing thing that like only really deep Mastery Neon players probably even understand or know about, which is kind of one of the reasons I pursued removing it. But basically, she had a reduction when she was sprinting side to side. This was just something we had done internally a long time ago to make sure, like, when you're tracking her, it wasn't kind of too ridiculous. But honestly, I just felt like it was weird that when you're sprinting directly forward, you moved much faster than you were sprinting side to side, and that felt like something that was off compared to like in my mind I view Neon as like she's the grounded movement duelist fantasy. It's like, oh, you're supposed to be kind of breaking people's ankles and like just kind of outplaying them with your movement. So I felt like any kind of restriction around that just felt a little bit out of place. It's probably a lot more power than we could really feel and we'll really know about, and this could be a horrible mistake, but I felt like, at least from like an inputs and understanding perspective, it seemed simpler to me and better to just be like, hey, when Neon sprints, she moves this amount faster, and that's all you have to kind of learn and know around as Neon.
So is it equal to the forward moving sprint speed now, or? Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah, that's zippy. That is zippy.
Yeah, that does seem like the bane of low-rank players' existence to try and shoot a Neon at this point. Like, being able to accurately deal with someone that's moving in any direction that quickly.
Yeah, well, at least
kind
they can't shoot you when they're sliding, though.
Unless.
Yeah, so that is, this one as well is wild. So there's two slides. Can you combo the slides together? Like, can you slide into a slide?
You can slide into a slide pretty quickly. That kind of 0.2 second buffer that is mentioned in the bottom should prevent like things from being too crazy. But you can definitely double slide on someone if you really want to. You are effectively locked out of the slide like while you're sliding, which is like a 0.6 second timer. So it's not like you're going to be like going super diagonal.
Yeah.
But you can combo them together pretty quickly.
Yeah. You can genuinely just cross somebody up now.
Yeah. I mean,
zip past them to the right and then zip past them to the left.
So how did these changes feel in playtests when you're running Neon? Because looking at this, I feel like the outplay potential is at ridiculous levels now, where a good Neon will just be styling on everybody constantly. Did it play that way?
So it actually didn't play like near like I know you guys look at this whole list and I look at it too and I'm like, oh my god, there are so many things like but honestly, like we're decent at the game when we play internally, and we like kill Neon out of slide like pretty regularly, and so we were kind of like, hey, how far can we push this, because this is such a committal risk compared to the other duelists in the game, right? It's like Jet is like up and behind you inside a smoke, Raze is flying through the air potentially with a shotgun and killing you like near instantly. So it's like, oh, how do we make Neon kind of able to compete? And this was one of the things we felt, is that like, hey, if you're sliding on people and you have no movement error, and just to clarify this, because this is like kind of a technical nerdy point, that doesn't mean you're like 100% laser accurate. You still have your baseline weapon error.
Yeah.
So it basically, the easiest way to kind of explain this patch note is that it means you're less random when you're shooting and sliding, and you pull your gun out faster to shoot. So you're not 100% laser beam accurate, but you're much better. And so what that kind of meant to us was like, oh, if Neon slides directly into you in close range, like, oh, you should be like very afraid, because that's a circumstance where it's harder for Neon to get into that position than a lot of our other duelists, right? It's like, oh, Neon probably had to work with her team to kill traps, or get in on the right time. She's mostly on the ground, which is just, more vulnerable relative to being in the air. You could get mollied, you could take damage from any of these other things.
I just want to clarify as well, because you said that there's the base kind of weapon inaccuracy, but the way that I'm reading this, it seems like it's more accurate to be sliding than to be running or walking. Am I right in that sense? It's as if you're stood still.
Yes, it is. It is basically more accurate than if you're running or crouching, for sure.
Right. Yeah, so that's, I mean, you still have to like track as you're sliding around and that kind of stuff, but it does seem very powerful, actually.
It actually seems crazy.
Yeah, it is very difficult to pull off, actually. Like, you're moving really fast and you're sliding, so you kind of have to, like, hit some pretty nice shots to actually take advantage of this, and it's like pretty difficult when you're entering on a site to, even be looking in the right place to begin with. So yeah, it is like a difficult skill test, but that was something that I felt like was really exciting for Neon players, because I felt like there's a lot of difficulty in Neon in general, but I didn't feel like the reward really matched up. So I felt like giving Neon a moment where it's like, oh, Neon absolutely went crazy on a baseline round with this slide was just really exciting, and honestly, it was just really enjoyable in tests. So that was mostly what pushed us to make the change. Was like, hey, just the total amount of fun Neon players were having with this change was really high, and maybe that's just because it's really powerful, but we'll see.
I know you guys have added some. You guys are already skilled in the playtest team and whatever, and then you've also added like Aaron and your boy Dre. Have they gotten their hands with a judge with the Neon changes going at people yet? Because that's terrifying to me.
Yeah. We've had Dre. We've had some of our other, the team's called like the GAT team, the gameplay analysis team. Had a bunch of them play this Neon changes, and we have a bunch of clips, and as a designer, you're watching these clips and you're like, how offended should I be by this? Let's do the right thing. You kind of have to step back and like assess, like, is this the right output for the circumstance? Should that player have died there? Like, they kind of got owned, but sometimes in Valorant you get owned, and that's life. You gotta go next round and figure out how to adapt, how to adjust. So yeah, we had a lot of clips from a lot of different GAT members all doing like kind of crazy things on Neon, and that's kind of just our testing process and how we build confidence in balance changes or any changes to the game in general.
Highlight clips are going to look so sick when someone's sliding and hits like the perfect headshot as they're mid-slide. That's just what I'm thinking about, man. The mini boo is...
Mini boo.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about the Icebox Neon montages where they're just jumping on 410 to pipes and pipes to 410 again into the nest and sliding, breaking ankles.
Yeah.
And then imagining myself in the position where I'm getting my ankle's broken.
Good players who like playing duelist, just like yes. Yeah. Bad players like us who get well, maybe not like Arden, but the bad players like the rest of us who get run over by duelists. Okay, let's have a look at the next one then. So Neon also with a change to the relay bolt. What's the thinking behind this one as well? It seems a little unrelated to the others.
Yeah, so this is kind of like total power budget related, honestly. It's like, yeah, there's a lot of buffs in the list. We felt like some power had to come from somewhere, and we felt like Neon kind of just like pressed a lot of buttons in a short period of time and just like affected a lot of space, and often it didn't feel super intentional. This is also just like a little bit of a tuning, like in my mind, like quality of life change where if you cast Neon's Q before and you like sprinted at kind of like mid-range or long-range at the spot you had just stunned, you would often run directly into your stun. And to me, that's just like, I'm like, we should fix that. We should make it more intuitive. So if you stun the spot and then you run, as long as it's not like right in front of you, like I can only save you from yourself so much. But if like if you stun in mid-range in like an average use case, you should be able to slide on the person that you conked and not have to kind of wait for the conk to pop. was kind of my logic there. And yeah, other than that, it was mostly just balance related. Just figuring like, hey, 2 slides, probably a lot of power, sprints getting buffed. Let's kind of trim some like potentially excessive, just like button spam, kind of like, use this kind of dumb term like moshiness to indicate like when you're just pressing all your buttons to just press buttons and put stuff into the world without much thought. That's something we kind of generally like to trim down on when we can. And hopefully this isn't too much power loss, because it is intended obviously to be a big buff list. So we'll obviously be, watching out for that and looking to adjust if we need to also.
All right. Let's have a look at the next one then. So we've got Reyna. And you mentioned earlier that the healing was something that you were looking at. Like, healing is just super powerful. And so the healing has been decreased, but you get to keep the overheal of the armor, which seems like a really... Like, all of the Reyna changes here, to me, seem like really good quality of life things. But also, I'm not really convinced that it's going to make Reyna
It seems like it
best
prevents a lot
duelist.
of snowballing, right? Because the healing's going from 100 to 50, whereas you'd bring a Reyna down to, I don't know, like whatever it is, just below the kill threshold of a Vandal with a few body shots. And then they heal back up to full, and because it's ranked, nobody trades effectively, But now it's like 50 heals. It seems like it's almost like a nerf for Reyna in ranked, but also it's a better quality of life improvement as well.
Yeah, that was kind of the main adjustment, is obviously the healing stuff we're talking about. The dismiss buff we hope is good for high level players that really kind of understand how to fight for staging space, how to play those aggressive off angles and like kind of get out of dodge. It is like a total distance increase. Like I think in the official patch notes we have the math. So the dismiss change is like a straight buff. Like you're both faster and you cover more distance. So hopefully like on both offense, if you get a pick and need to E into the site, or like can manage to E for, or defense, if you're on those early off angles, you can get out of more situations. That's kind of what we're hoping. Kind of pulls the weight for high level Reyna players. We did originally have some more aggressive power up lines, but we were just kind of concerned with like, the whole package just feeling like buffs to good players, where Reyna is still like good, just not like insane in ranked. So we have some things in our back pocket if we need to follow up down the line that we think could push the needle more. But yeah, that mostly wanted to kind of see how much these healing and timer changes worked in isolation, because I think a lot of the mechanics in our game that's like, hey, you must go fight now, are like pretty bad for pro and high level play, where people really value the like, extra player advantage.
So generally then, do you guys feel that Reyna's current standing is essentially close enough to the level of Jet and Raze that it doesn't require significant buffs right now? Like, you're kind of content with where she's at in regard to the power hierarchy?
Yeah, she is intended to be like an agent that you pick, and you're supposed to be egoing, right? It's supposed to be like, oh, I'm the god carry, I'm the the one man army. It's not supposed to be like, we're not gonna just like omega buff one piece of team utility for Reyna, like make the flash insane and be like, now we got Reyna into pro. Yeah, we're really excited about Reyna in pro. It's mostly about like maintaining Reyna's identity as still like somewhat of a selfish character, but also trying to like, make that selfish potential a little bit less stompy and ranked, and a little bit more valuable.
Do you hear that, people who pick Reyna in my games? Selfish. The devs have called you personally selfish.
Stop bottom frag.
Come on, man. Why are you just calling me out? This is ridiculous.
All right, let's move on further. So this is Raze. So in combination with moving some of the other duelists kind of up the power hierarchy, as you were saying, Wyatt, there's no changes to Jet, but there is a change to Raze. First of all, why did you think that there needed to be that change, and why have you gone for this one?
Yeah, so with Raze, we'd kind of been struggling a little bit with her identity for a long time, in terms of like, she was around since the beginning of the game, and she was developed as like, oh, this explosives agent that clears spaces. Internal conversations around the game's launch were like, oh my god, is Raze like almost an initiator? She has so much flushing utility. And then, emergent player behavior, everyone learns how crazy these satchels are, and we have to kind of make these calls on like, hey, how much of the mobility is acceptable? Is it okay that she's flying through the air and also having all this flushing utility? And I think, the more we've seen it, the more we've been like, it's a little bit over the line. particularly in terms of like the amount of space you can take super quickly right off the barrier rip with like limited information you're giving to your opponents with a quick cast ability, right? Like it doesn't oftentimes feel like there's that much planning going on for Raze, and that she just kind of gets to do what she wants really quickly. And so that was kind of the motivation behind the audio changes, which I think are like actually pretty big in terms of like clearing up game state and making opponents understand what is actually happening to you. Because I think that was the thing that personally offended me the most about Raze is like, oh, oftentimes Raze is landing on my head and I had no idea. I didn't even hear the satchels or really understand what was going on. So basically, when we decided to make these horizontal velocity changes, we had our chat and we were saying like, hey, we like that Raze has the sandbox mobility tool. We don't want to like completely remove the ability for Raze to like use two satchels or do like this kind of fun movement stuff. But we do feel like for the sake of competition within the ecosystem, her going this far, this fast, and this silently is probably just unhealthy long term for the game. And it is painful to make this kind of change in terms of like messing with player muscle memory and all this kind of learned mastery. But at times we feel like we just have to do it for the good of the ecosystem, kind of similar to like how we ended up having to change Jet's dash to kind of have that wind up rather than just being that like one button click.
So what does this mean? That's the problem that I'm having interpreting this without a video, which unfortunately we don't have here. I'm when we get into the game, I'm sure it's going to be obvious. But does this mean that you can't really turn that well? I'm trying to think about like normal double satchel kind of spots.
Like where you go
A
like,
ramp on split. A ramp on split just comes into my head. Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to turn midair. You have to then put down your second satchel, and then the second one's pretty much straight. So could you, using those kind of examples, what has shifted here that is either harder or not possible to do anymore?
Yeah, so ones like that where you're kind of not actually going that far, you'll still probably be able to do pretty decent ones, like the split A ones. It basically just means each satchel pushes you less quickly, but only in the horizontal direction. And the main reason we chose that is because we found that when we nerfed the entire thing, it's like, oh, if you try to boost on a box, like sometimes your box boost would just get flubbed and you're just trying to go straight up. Whereas we really wanted to mostly just try to keep this nerf isolated to like the extreme mobility cases of when you're double satcheling horizontally.
I've just had a light bulb moment. I didn't even realize that what you meant was it gives you less speed in the horizontal direction. I thought it meant you couldn't turn easily.
Well, yeah, I mean, but
no.
So are we talking horizontal as in just this plane?
The horizontal plane.
Yes.
The one that goes horizontally.
Yeah.
Not the vertical plane. Yeah. Right. So it's just it's just your movement is slower in the air. So that also means that the overall distance that you can cover is lower as well. So like the absolutely bonkers satchels, for example, like some people can go from the spawn barrier basically on Ascent to Generator. I don't know how they're managing to do that, accessing some hidden movement tech. But those kind of ones where it's like max distance, those will kind of be snuffed by this.
Yeah. The ones like the top gen to the double stack box are definitely much harder and maybe impossible to do now. Those were actually, we were looking at those examples in terms of like, hey, like how do these stack up to kind of do the tuning of the ability. The total reduction is like around 20%, but just due to the way how the math works out, it's like kind of incorrect to actually give that number because there were just some like weird intricacies in the math originally that if we like actually fixed those or like changed them, it would have changed the behavior to basically levels we didn't want to change it to. That's the kind of nerdy reasoning why it's vague.
Yeah. So does it feel then when you're playing against a Raze that is double satcheling, you have that audio cue as well, that overall you're just, as a player, finding it more easy to kill Razes mid-air that are double satcheling or be exactly aware of they're going to land because they're going slowly, have your crosshair ready?
Yeah, and I want to set expectations here. Even with 20% reduced, it is by no means slow on a site exec. It's not like the util hell is raining down on you if you didn't fight for any staging space and reduce all that stuff. Kind of drain the enemy util. If you're getting exec done and Raze is flying past you, you're gonna know it's happening, but it's still gonna be difficult to deal with. At least has been our experience internally. So yeah, it is generally just easier to kind of parse and understand. And I think that's like just a key part of actually like tuning in our game is like, production tells on things like audio and VFX actually make like a huge difference in terms of understanding like what's going to happen or how to counterplay something. And that's something we see in dev agents all the time. It was like Gecko's Dizzy was like one of the most insane abilities of all time for all of development. And then towards the tail end, we got like really good audio in and we're like, oh, now we can hear the thing and shoot it. So I think that's something, we try to leverage to be like a way to nerf something that isn't exactly like, hey, this thing is just strictly less powerful, because then the game state is more clear for all players involved.
Yeah. Dan, you mentioned talking about removing muscle memory and player skill expression. I'm concerned now that we've had it kind of feels like an attack on skill expression in the game with a couple of the changes. I'm thinking about like the smoke audio change. I'm thinking about like some of the sky dog changes and stuff like that. I want to know from your perspective how those discussions go when you're dealing with such a significant change like this that affects people's, to me, direct fun when it comes to movement. Because this one is probably the most in that direction where it's like, yeah, the movement from Raze is probably one of the most enjoyable parts of how people play. How do those discussions go internally?
Yeah, I think generally we do tend to like heavily weigh it. I think it comes up for basically any agent that has this type of like identity problem. Is it's like, oh hey, how important is this skill expression? Are there enough totally skilled things that the character can do? It's like Raze outside of this does have like a generally fairly easy kit, so I think it is like particularly painful on Raze, where it's like, oh, this was like one of the key differentiators between the best Raze player and like just an average Raze player just throwing nades and kind of pressing her buttons on a round-around basis. But I think in general, it's not like we're ever just trying to dumb the game down or make the game easier for everyone. It's like we want to make sure that the game state is clear and that people understand what's going on and that variety is around. Because I think that's like the big ecosystem level concern we have, is that like, oh, if we don't tune these other characters down, or the highest skill expression, most kind of like generically pickable characters, like would we have ever seen the level of Yoru mastery we see in pro play now without some nerfs to Jet, some nerfs to Raze? And that's kind of the like philosophical question we have to kind of assess, is like, is the ecosystem worth the pain point for these kind of highly masterful characters? And I think from our perspective, we generally think it is, and we generally think that like a more varied game is generally more fun over the long tail. But I do think like all that feedback is useful and stuff we take to heart, and we don't make these kind of changes lightly or like just enjoy nerfing or dumbing down the game.
Let's have a look at the next one then. So if we move on from Raze, we've got Clove up next. And
I was a little surprised to see, but also after reading it, I think makes sense if you're, at least I'm assuming this is purely an assessment based on ranked data, where even in personal experience can say that
there
there's
is
tons
no
of
pro
Cloves,
data.
and especially in ranked, there's so many Cloves, and it feels so dominant to as a ranked agent.
Yes, this is almost entirely ranked data driven. This is a case like usually we don't just view ranked data as like, oh, we must do anything based on this ranked data. But for Clove, it was like, this is the strongest ranked agent the game has ever seen, pretty much. So we kind of need to figure out how to tune around Clove. Obviously, I was the lead designer on Clove, so I feel like a little sad having to nerf Clove. But just in terms of like keeping ranked fair for people, the disadvantage you had from picking like Omen versus Clove or Brimstone versus Clove or whatever was just like massive. So we just kind of feel like we have to start kind of chipping away and figuring out that problem. And if it turns out that like we have to continuously nerf Clove and they don't start seeing more play in pro, we might look to do similar things to Reyna, where we have to do some kind of reshape down the line to kind of flatten that experience a little bit. Because yeah, right now Clove like very, very good in ranked, very, very strong. Could
you kind of give an example of an actual, I don't know, like tangible data comparison between Clove and in terms of how good they are in ranked to like the second best agent that there is in ranked, to kind of express that in a clear way?
I can. So I don't know if we'll actually be able to talk about this exact part. I don't know if like data people would get mad at me or whatever. But the win rate difference from playing Omen versus Clove is like almost 16% or something like that on average. So it is massive. And
That's
Valorant win
pretty
rates
crazy.
are, yeah, it's like that is, I believe, the biggest difference between two agents in the game is if you play Omen versus Clove in ranked, like obviously Omen, very good agent, very strong, very overrated in ranked. Compared to Clove. So I think that's the kind of thing where it's like even if pros aren't valuing Clove because, the skill set doesn't fit into like this kind of retake heavy like strong side map meta that we're seeing now, we do sometimes need to make changes just for the overall ecosystem of the game, and Clove is an example of that.
Yeah, I can understand that. I believe that's the end of the changes. Although, let's have a look. Yes. Okay. So I wanted to ask at the end here why some of the other duelists weren't touched. It's not like Phoenix and Yoru are dominating the game or have extremely good gap closing abilities. Although I suppose for Yoru, there are some ways of playing him like that. But Phoenix, especially, is not really seeing much love at the pro level, or from anecdotal experience, in ranked really either. So, why were some reasons that they weren't touched?
Yeah, so this kind of just goes into like shipping things we're confident in and making sure we're actually happy with all the changes we tried or tested. Uh, for Yoru, we didn't actually test that much stuff because, to be honest, I kind of feel like Yoru is fine. I'm like, he is high mastery, he's played on some maps, he's kind of gradually picking up steam. All of our internal data indicates that like the more time you put into Yoru, the better he is. And I think he certainly feels powerful and is like carving a place out as like a duelist that can kind of bully Cypher around is something that I think is kind of interesting for Yoru. Uh, but for Phoenix, to be frank, it was just we just didn't land on anything for this timeline that we were super happy with. So we're still working on it. We're
Right.
still working on him, trying to figure some stuff out. Obviously, no promises yet, but it's something we definitely know we want to do and figure out. But I'd rather be upfront and just say like, yeah, we're not going to ship stuff we weren't like super happy with, so we're going to spend some more time trying to figure stuff out.
I'm telling you, those fire wings, it fits the theme. It's a phoenix. He's a bird. Get him wings. Get him flying into the back line. You can have that one for free, Dan. Don't worry. I don't require any pay for that consultation.
Yeah. I think the scary thing about giving everyone a dash is that then you're starting to play the game and you're like, well, do I even try to defend these bomb sites, or do I just continuously opt into retaking every round? And um, I think that's a meta problem that kind of just affects the enjoyment of the game for our like particularly our like highest end players. It's like, oh, sometimes dying on the bomb site and having your last stand is a really important player fantasy. Sorry to go down a rabbit hole based off your joke, but
Yeah. No, I
No,
understand
that's
it.
good.
It's
I had
useful.
to.
It's useful. Any other stuff from the group?
I'm curious about speaking about like people who haven't been touched. Jet in this case, there's clearly still significant maps where they're Jet maps, and to me that always comes back to stemming from the op problem. Are you guys still thinking, or are you guys thinking at all about how just the overall balance of agents that can op affect the duelist balance, in particular the Jet balance?
Yeah, I think so. From my personal perspective, I think we could have nerfed Jet. I mostly opted out of it because I just felt like we have nerfed Jet so many times, and I don't really feel like she feels too problematic right now. I think there is a chance that we'll revisit that. If the Raze nerfs are harsher, um, or like tougher to adapt to than we expected them, and then Jet just is the queen again, we would probably take another look. But I think agents' interactions with weapons are always something we're kind of thinking about. I think from my perspective with Jet and the op, I think the big opportunity space from my end working on balance is like I think Chamber is still a little weaker than he should be. Like I think Jet kind of takes over that kind of defensive op utility tax space a little better than she should compared to Chamber. And so that's something that I've kind of been thinking about a little bit. Obviously no promises there. But that's kind of something that like in my mind is like a little bit of an ecosystem gap. Is that like Jet probably overperforms on both sides and is like a little bit generic, and then Chamber isn't quite as defensively strong as he should be. But that's kind of where my head's at.
Just to close things out, I wanted to ask, what are you hoping for as the result of this patch? Would you like to see? Is it ranked in particular that you're looking at? Is it, what's the metric of success for this and introducing that variety to the ecosystem?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the ideal world would be like, oh, in ranked, everyone can play everything and everyone's happy, and in pro, everyone can also play everyone and everyone is happy. I think, to be honest, I think even with like huge buffs to Neon, I think it's like still somewhat unlikely. I think I'd still just be happy with a more healthy ranked ecosystem and people feeling like their mastery on characters like, Neon and Reyna are rewarded in ways that are more interesting or just more fun. Like I think a lot of the Neon changes were supposed to be like high skill fantasy, high mastery up, and I think that's just like a compelling thing for players of our genre is like, oh, I can put a lot of time into Neon and become, like an insane movement agent player, and then I can just sink a lot of time into this and get a lot of enjoyment out of it. I think for ISO, it'd be really cool if we saw him on long range maps. I think Bala talked about kind of the interactions between agents and the operator. I think this ISO change is a very strong tool against operators, which is something I'm really excited about because I think usually the tools in our game that are good against operators are just really long flashbangs, which are generally good against anyone with eyes. So really excited for that.
I was just thinking then as well that is it kind of silly to think that it would be good to op with ISO as well?
It's bad. I've tried it.
Really?
I tried a lie spammed ISO when it came out, like 100 games.
Yeah, I'm just thinking equipping it, like if you're on Ascent and you like equip the shield as you take a peek into mid or something,
Yeah,
you can't really get
crazy
punished
in
that
op
easily.
1v1s, yeah.
Yeah, it would be nasty in 1v1s. But I mean, yeah, you can't dash out.
Yeah, it'd be good to op in ISO 1v1s. I think it's a little slow to like equip the shield and then peek.
Yeah.
I think that is one thing about the ISO change we didn't talk too much about. Is one thing I'm expecting we'll need to tune is the like audio cue on the shield popping, like figuring out like, hey, what are the right ranges where you should hear it versus is it ever okay if you're just surprised by it? Is something I'm kind of excited to figure out.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be an interesting patch. Neon lovers everywhere rejoicing. Well, thank you very much, Dan, for joining us. Appreciate your insight as always. And well, leave a comment down below what you think about the about the change and any points that you disagree with as well. There should be some interesting commentary down there, I'm sure. Thank you again, and we'll
Bye, Penguin.
see you all next time. Bye.
See you guys.